To the organizers of this event, thank you for your patience and your persistence. For 4 years, we've been trying for me to be able to make it, but either health or other problems prevented it. And I'm so glad. On this day, you said 13 Kanin, the day of the rising of the corn seed, huh? Am I right? That the energies converged. Which is why those who want an incomplete world are afraid of 13. So, you know, I've been brought here by powers beyond me, and I'm grateful to them. Thank you to the grandmothers who are here. And the little children. And the different indigenous communities who have resisted being dissolved into an anonymous monoculture. I think our collective work at this point is to get rid of some illusions that have dominated the planet's life and the lives of different cultures, and could, in fact, if they carry on, become a major threat to the survival of humans and all species. I'm talking about this from my own experience every year of increasing disasters that are totally man-made. They are not natural phenomena. We've had regions with low rain, like yours, though yesterday we were blessed with so much rain that it was difficult for McDure to drive us from the airport. It was like the Indian monsoon, not a desert rain. But the new droughts are man-made with climate change. We've had cyclones, but the cyclone like the kind that has just hit the eastern coast of India and the Bay of Bengal, its intensity is 3 times more than average historical intensities. The damage is much worse. And my own region in the Himalaya, this summer in June, because of snow melt, because of intensive rain, we had a glacial lake burst, we had flooding, we've had landslides, and we've lost 20,000 people in our region. And we can see on a daily basis, we witness how much damage those illusions are creating. Of course, one of the big illusions was that Columbus discovered this land. And of course, he didn't know this land existed. He was actually thinking he's coming to India for the spices, because the textile trade and the spice trade was the big trade of that time and came from India. So they were coming to colonize India. Instead, he lands here. Instead of saying, oh, Columbus made a blunder, they say Columbus discovered America. The only good thing that came out of it is you all get to be called Indians, and we are Indians in our unity and our diversity. Now, the jurisprudence of that time gave rise to an idea of the empty land. Terra nullius, it was called. And the assumption was that if the land is not inhabited by white Christians, then it is empty, because anyone who's not white is not human, and anyone who has a faith different from Christianity is not a culture. And in one fell swoop, the majority of the world was written off as not existing. I think we are all part of the Earth family, I have no problem with being told we are part of the fauna and flora. That's all right. But then to be told we are not part of the human family, that's a bit much. That's the illusion. Now, I wrote a book on biopiracy before biopiracy started to happen, because I could see that with what I have called the second coming of Columbus, we would get a repetition of those illusions, now not on the land, but with our seeds, our biodiversity, and our living systems. Columbus got his power from the 1492 Papal Bull, where the Pope issued a bull saying the kings and queens of Europe of that time could go and take over territory anywhere in the world and own it on behalf of God. That is why it's been called the civilizing mission. There was a piece of paper, a parchment, with which Columbus traveled. And I realized this when I was trying to find out where did the word patent start. Because patent today is used for owning life. It is used as intellectual property. And it's a strange word, so I looked into the history and found out that in those days, when kings and queens conspired against each other to say, let's gang up and kill that empire and take over that kingdom, they used to sell sealed letters. What Columbus got was a letter's patent, which meant the open letter. So he could open it up to the native communities and say, here is my right to take over your land. That letter patent, open letter, was the beginning of the word patent. And patent now is about ownership, except that ownership has become much broader. If in that period of the 15th century, it was the land that was defined empty, even though it had been nurtured and looked after for millennia. I was just being told yesterday in the drive from the airport that there are communities here that are living in the same place, using the same corn, growing the same seed as their ancestors of 4,000 years, 2,000 years, we don't know. We don't know. But that is not emptiness. It is a long history. But a blinded eye doesn't see. And an eye blinded by multiple discriminations based on gender, based on race, based on hate for the earth, which is why they had to define the earth as dead. Another illusion we have to go beyond. The earth is dead matter. All of mechanistic science is based on the assumption that the earth is dead matter. Whereas in all traditional cultures and the beautiful prayers with which today we opened the meeting, the earth is living. She's our mother. We are alive because of her. But even in science, we know the earth is not dead. I did my doctoral work on quantum theory, which told us thinking of the world as a machine is such a wrong way to think. James Lovelock, a scientist who worked for NASA, called the earth Gaia because he realized she's living. And not only is she living, she creates the conditions for life on earth. For the right kind of temperature, for the right kind of humidity, for the right kind of ecological niche for the biosphere and all its biodiversity to flourish. So that empty land, terra nullius thinking, led to the takeover of territories. The idea of the empty life, I call it bio-nullius, is leading to the attempt to take over our seeds. I call it an attempt because we together will not allow it to happen. I was very privileged that I was invited in 1987 to a conference, a small think tank where the industry was there, the United Nations was there, and some of us independent scientists and they call us civil society members were there. To me, it assumes that the rest of it is uncivil. And the industry laid out its plans. And what was this industry? This was the industry that in the last century had evolved weapons of mass destruction through chemicals. They had created nerve gases, which became the pesticides for agriculture. They had created explosives, and it's those factories that today make the nitrogen fertilizers. You remember the Oklahoma bombing? What was the bomb? Nitrogen bomb, a fertilizer bomb. The Oslo bombings, fertilizer bomb. All of Afghanistan, fertilizer bombs. I was having dinner with a bunch of security people, and the US security person said, now I realize how they've got so much bombing material. We gave so much fertilizer to counter the Soviets. And now the Afghanis and the Taliban are totally equipped to keep bombing wherever they want. So the industry that grew in power, making chemicals for war, after the war didn't want to give up their habit of making money from chemicals that kill. So they turned these into agrochemicals and created the most amazing propaganda. They'd show a little bug for whom we should have love, about whom, whom we should know. The little spiders in our fields and the ladybird beetles who are our pest control agents. And they turned them into our enemies. And if you look at the advertising for pesticides, every living thing is an enemy. And in the long debates I have had with the biotechnology industry, they have said amazing things. For example, Cargill, which is the world's biggest grain trader, used to control seed, and now Monsanto has bought up Cargill seeds. They were trying to bring hybrid sunflower. I know there's a sunflower right here. Comes from you. Well, Cargill wanted to make money. The sunflower seeds failed. The farmers, I used to travel the country to inform the farmers about the free trade agreements and everything. And then the farmers just tore down the Cargill plant. And the Cargill representative at a press conference said, the Indian peasants are so stupid, they don't realize we have smart technologies that prevent the bees from usurping the pollen. Bees don't usurp the pollen. They pollinate. We would have no food without them. Now you can see the thinking that treats bees as usurping the pollens, then doesn't mind if 75% bees of this planet disappear. But of course, Monsanto takes the cake always. And they have this Roundup-resistant crops where they spray herbicides to kill everything green. That is not the seed that they have sowed. And when we were having these issues in the Convention on Biological Diversity, and we were insisting that these GMOs should be banned, a representative of Monsanto got up and said, we have smart technologies that prevent the weeds from stealing the sunshine. Yeah. Now, that same mind designed intellectual property, and at that meeting of 1987, The war industry, which had become the agrochemical industry, was now wanting to become the seed industry. And they were saying, it's not fair that farmers save seeds. They should be prevented from saving seeds. And the law that makes it illegal for farmers to have their own seed should be a global treaty. Later, Monsanto is on record saying they wrote that treaty. As they say, we were the patient, the diagnostician, and the physician all in one. You will have a problem if the same person is the patient and the diagnostician and the physician. And they defined the problem as seed saving. And they offered the solution as criminalization of seed saving. When I heard all this, that's the day I decided I would dedicate the rest of my life to save the seed. Not that I knew anything about how to save seeds. But if I can learn, anyone can learn. I would go with books from my parents' library and go to the villagers and show them images of plants and say, do you have seeds of this plant? And usually the men would say no, because they only dealt with the crops that go to the market. For example, soya bean. And the women would whisper and say, no, 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 we have them, come, 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 come. The best was, you know, a family of crops that have been absolutely driven to extinction is the family called the millets. Yeah. Now, millets are very nutritious. They're very resilient. They can give you 40 times more nutrition than rice and wheat, using no water. In the worst of areas, you just throw some millet seeds and they'll grow. The reason they have the name millets is because it comes from million. Each seed gives rise to a million. The seeds are very tiny. And you have the finger millet, the barnyard millet, the horsetail millet, the pearl millet, the sorghum. We call these forgotten foods. They were driven out of cultivation. And with them went nutrition. And we believe these forgotten foods are foods for the future, because they give you so much more nutrition with no demand at all. I think the reason they were banished was twofold. First, the tiny seeds are very difficult to manipulate. Corn was the easiest. That's why they made the hybrids of corn first. The millet's much more difficult. And second, there is a built-in racism in a science that is for domination. And anything brown and black for them is inferior. And we say black is beautiful. Color is vital and wonderful. You know, we have the beautiful mustard. We use mustard as a cooking oil in my region. I mean, there are different parts of India that have different oil seeds. And each part has a different cooking system because of the oil seeds. So northern India, you get mustard. And the color of spring for us is the yellow of the mustard. We all dress in yellow on the day of spring, called the Basant. In the dry areas, it's sesame, Niger, linseed. In the coastal areas where you have coconut, you cook with coconut. Now, all these oils are not treated as oils because oil must come from soya. How did soya become an oil seed? It's not oily, you know. Good oil seeds like groundnut and sesame, you just have to mush it with your hands and you get the oil. You can do what you want to with the soya seed and it will not give you oil. They have to put it through a solvent extraction plant, 400 degrees centigrade, to squeeze the oil out of it. And to push it on countries like India, they tried to ban our oils in '98. So I had to do what I've done again and again and again on the issue of seed and food. followed Gandhi. Gandhi had told us that whenever there is an unjust law that violates all ethical principles and principles of justice, it must not be obeyed, because as long as the illusion exists that unjust law must be obeyed, so long will slavery exist. So in 1906, Gandhi was a lawyer practicing in South Africa, and the apartheid regime of separating society by race was being put in place. And one of the laws passed was that everyone had to register on the basis of race. And Indians would have to wear a badge, I'm an Indian. The blacks would have a badge, I'm black. The whites would have a badge, I'm white. I think the whites didn't have to have a badge, probably. But Gandhi said, we are one citizenry. This is discrimination. We will not be divided by race. And he led this satyagraha, and he named it satyagraha that day. And it was September the 11th. We call it the other September 11th. The other 9/11. The 9/11 not of fear, but of freedom. And he marched, and everyone was arrested, but eventually they couldn't put those laws in place. He called it satyagraha. Satya means truth. Agraha means the struggle of truth. And what we are dealing with today is the struggle of the truth of the seed to speak to the world. And for us to be messengers of that message, of the seed. What is the seed? It's not matter. I'm dealing with laws helping the Europeans, helping the Africans, where they have turned our seeds, our living seeds, into matter. And then the Monsantos enter and turn that matter into plant propagating material. Seed has been reduced to raw material in the new laws, which we are helping fight. We prevented such a law from coming into force in India. In 2004, they attempted it. It was called compulsory registration. And we led a seed satyagraha, the fight for the truth of the seed, because the seed wants to be free. Farmers need freedom to save their own seeds. And these freedoms can't be taken away. The government, to date, has not been able to implement that law. And that's what we have to make sure everywhere across the world. So what are the traditional seeds that the colonizers would like to turn into dead matter? Our living seeds are the embodiment of our cultures. The corn is not just corn. The corn is a goddess. The corn is divinity. The corn is sacred. The corn embodies centuries of memory. The seeds of our ancestors, as was said earlier. The seed embodies the language of place. Why do we have so much diversity? Because every place has a different expression. I call the diversity of seed the tongues of the earth. Just like we have different tongues and different languages which we should not lose, the earth has different languages and expression which it does not want to lose. When I travel the world and I see the corn plantations, I won't call them farms, they're not like the graceful corn plant that grows and the leaves go back to this earth. All good corn has leaves that bend down. Yeah? And then the corn comes at different spaces, and there's rich tassels. But the new corn, which is an industrial raw material, it's not meant for being eaten. It's meant for biofuel, it's meant for animal feed, it's meant for industry, it's meant for industrial harvesting, so a machine can go through the field and pick the corn. I really look at this corn, the leaves go like this. And when I've asked scientists, why do the leaves go straight like this? They say to maximize photosynthesis. I said, you think nature didn't know how to do photosynthesis? You got to help? And you know, you can travel the length and breadth of Africa, Europe. I see these cornfields as Hitler's armies, you know, identical to the dot. No plant of a different height, different shape. Even the corn doesn't have the freedom to grow the seed where it wants to. And I've seen something very strange in the hybrid corn that's introduced into India, and it's happening everywhere. Do we have a corn cob here? Okay. You know, when the corn is covered with this, it shelters the seed, right? In the hybrid corn, I don't know what's going on. Maybe some elders and shamans can tell us. There are leaves, dark green leaves coming out from above, as if the plant is starting to grow again. And so many scientists who do work on genetic engineering, not to promote it, but to investigate its harms, tell me that most genetic engineering is creating mutants. You might remember there was a very famous case of Dolly the sheep, right? Now, Dolly the sheep was covered by Time magazine, Newsweek, Economist. All of them had the same cover. There was Dolly, and there was Ian Winmott, the scientist at Roslin Institute. And below it was the caption, the creator, he was the creator, and she was the created. The creator and the created. Well, Dolly's right now in a museum because she couldn't survive. You know, all that Ian Wilmot had done is take the cell from one sheep and another cell from another sheep, remove the nucleus of one, and put an electric shock to merge the cells. And Dolly was an accident of an electric shock. But she had 272 other sisters who weren't born fully as sheep. Some didn't have eyes, some had 2 legs, not 4, some didn't have ears. These were monsters. They never talk of Dolly's sisters, do they? Well, Dolly's, as I said, stuffed in a museum, and that was not creation. It was an irresponsible experiment. And yet that irresponsible experiment carries on again and again and again because there is this other illusion that man, in the form of corporations, who have been given the legal personality of a human being, that corporations like Monsanto are creators of life on earth. We joke and say, for them, GMO means God move over. No place for creation. We are the creators. Now, not only is that wrong in any case because there is an amazing creator at work, but also because they are not creating anything. They are destroying what exists. And, you know, when I've been trying for so long to understand how is it destructive acts get counted as creation, I realized it's because there's this very deep thinking in capitalist corporate patriarchy, where the love for greed and money and the love for power becomes one. And it cannot tolerate the freedom of life to replenish itself. It cannot tolerate anything that's free and alive. And so it creates entire structures to deny life and its processes and its freedom. So look at the fact of how do we measure the economy. We measure the economy in terms of what is called the GDP, gross domestic product. That's all that counts. You know what GDP measures? The definition of GDP is if you produce what you consume, you don't produce. So the amazing farms of the Native Americans don't exist. The native corn doesn't exist. The languages don't exist. The beautiful weaving our cultures have doesn't exist. Because we don't produce commodities. We create care. And useful things come out as a byproduct, just as much as in food. We don't focus on growing food. We focus on taking care of the earth. We focus on giving back to the earth. And food is the earth's gift to us. So GDP denies production. And in the same way, intellectual property rights deny reproduction. So as long as a seed reproduces itself, it's not an intellectual property. The amazing intelligence of our grandmothers is not intelligence. Nature is not intelligent, and therefore leaves have to stand like that to get instruction on how to do photosynthesis. So intelligence is only in the destructive mind. And then the other illusion takes over. Destruction becomes creation. And creation is denied. And today, that is what we have to correct. You did it when you opened this meeting with the prayer to creation and the thanksgiving. You did it again and again in your music. You're doing it in your work. We have to put life and creation at the center. We have to name the destruction as destruction. We have to name the piracy and theft as piracy and theft, and not reward it as intellectual property. So in our seeds is not just the memory of our ancestors, but the potential to take care of the 7 generations to come, which is why it's about you, the little children in this hall. The seed is you. And as long as the seed is free, you are free. As long as the seed is healthy, you are healthy. As long as the seed has this amazing intelligence, that intelligence is your intelligence. And as long as the seed is grounded in place, you are grounded in your culture. In India, at the beginning of the cultivation season, different parts of India will say the prayer in different ways, but in effect the prayer is, may the seed be exhaustless. May it never exhaust itself. And there's a story from my region that when, the British came in and there was a war, etc., and people died of hunger, but we store the seed in pumpkin shells, beautiful gourd shells, and the gourd shells were full. Not one seed had been eaten because it is a sin to destroy seed. But that sin has become the logic of growth, the logic of a mechanistic, destructive science. And it looks like the prayer that Monsanto says is, may the seed be exhausted, so our profits are exhaustless. So that when we force every farmer to buy seed every season, the profits to St. Louis, Missouri, continue forever. I'll give you the example of my country. Monsanto came in with genetically modified cotton seeds. Now, cotton is very important to us. Not only is the species of cotton in India an indigenous variety, and we have thousands of varieties, blue cotton and yellow cotton and red cotton and pink cotton and green cotton, brown cotton, and the weaving used to be done with naturally colored cotton. But Gandhi had used the cotton for our freedom. He had said that we cannot fight cannonballs with cannonballs. We cannot fight guns with guns. We will fight the might of the British Empire by taking out the spinning wheel and spinning our own cloth and declaring that we will not be dependent on you. Because to the extent that we are economically dependent, we will be politically slaves. And so in 1987, when I started the movement Navdanya, which means 9 seeds, also the new gift of the commons, of seed sharing, I took inspiration from the spinning wheel. I said, as long as we are dependent on seed, we will be slaves. But if we save our own seeds, we will be free. Today, cotton has become the seed of slavery for India. In 1997-98, Monsanto brought the GMO BT cotton, announcing it would be selling commercially the following year. I know the laws of my country. I participated in framing some of them. So I rang up the ministries and said, did you give an approval? They said, no, we don't know what's BT cotton. We don't know what's Monsanto. We have no application. So I sued Monsanto. And they could not sell the seeds till 2002. But you know, they don't bring seeds to a market and say, choose if you want. Because most people would say, don't want your GM seeds. So they do it through coercion. They do it through corruption. And by 2002, they corrupted a few people in the Indian government, and approval was granted. From that period to now, immediately the seed cost jumped 8,000%. Seed that was renewal could be saved every year. Now had to be bought every year, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times every year, because it's not from the place. It fails. The rain is too much, which it has been this year, it's failed. 3 years ago, there was a terrible drought, it failed. It was supposed to control a pest, it has created new pests. 300% more aphids and jacids. And the bollworm that it was supposed to control is now a super pest. So there's more spraying of pesticide. With high costs of pesticides, high costs of seed, farmers are indebted. And more than 284,000 farmers in India have committed suicide since Monsanto came into the country. I have called it a genocide. When Monsanto gets hopping bad and plants false stories, and now they control the entire scientific literature of the world. Nature, Science, Scientific American have just become extensions of their propaganda. There is no independent science left in the world. Every time an independent scientist does some work, they go after them, make sure their job is destroyed, make sure their funding is stopped. They did it with an amazing scientist, Arpat Putsai, who showed that GM seeds cause a shrinking of the brain, enlargement of the pancreas, and a total devastation of the intestinal system. Seralini, the French scientist, has just done studies. 2 years of corn feeding. The rats had organ failure, kidney, liver failure, and tumors of a scale that could not be predicted. Offspring death of very high rates. So instead of accepting the result, they go and take over the editorial board of the Journal of Chemical and Food Toxicology. And now Monsanto approves the papers that will be published. They go after Seralini and try and shut his lab. And what we need to do is defend our own knowledge, create our own knowledge. Know directly from the seed and the food and the earth what good seed and good food is. So we do not have to be waiting for a fraudulent journal or a newspaper piece to tell us the reality. You grow 3 sisters. Yeah? You grow corn, you grow pumpkin, and you grow beans. In the many years in which I've been doing seed saving and helping farmers grow seed as organic mixed polycultures and biodiverse systems, we find that mixtures actually produce more. A field of the three sisters will produce much more food and nutrition than a field of the most chemically intensive industrial corn. Just as an assumption, if the three sisters produce 10 units of food, of which corn is 4, industrial agriculture might take the corn to 4 to 5 or to 6 units. But it has lost 4 units of good nutrition. The protein from the beans, the wonderful vitamin A from the pumpkin. There would be no nutritional deficiency if we defended our traditional seeds. Because our traditional seeds grow with our traditional values. And our traditional values are about sharing, about cooperation, about compassion. The industrial agriculture is about war against the earth, war against farmers, war against our bodies. It is an agriculture of ignorance. There's no science in it. To take a weapon of mass destruction and apply it on agriculture is not knowledge. It is absence of knowledge. Because if you had knowledge, you would hesitate. You would not kill the biodiversity. You would not kill the butterflies and the bees. You would not exterminate the earthworm, which multiplies soil fertility. Compared to the soil that it eats, the casting of the earthworm has 10 times more potassium, 5 times more nitrogen, 7 times more phosphorus, 3 times more magnesium, 1.5 times more calcium, 1.4 times more humus than the soil that it ate. This is the ecological fertilizer factory. As long as we look after the soil organisms and the earthworms, we'll never run out of soil fertility. We'll never run out of food. But when we throw urea on the soil, we will run out of food, we'll run out of soil, we'll run out of water, because urea requires a lot of irrigation. Now, as I mentioned, Navdanya means 9 seeds. But we also have systems of 12 seeds, 9 seeds, 7 seeds, 5 seeds growing together. And wherever, the higher the diversity, which means the more the diversity of our native seeds, because only native seeds can grow together. Industrial seed can only grow alone, because it is bred for chemical inputs. When it's bred for chemical inputs, it cannot survive with other plants, because other plants have different requirements. So it must be a monoculture. And the same applies to us as human beings. When we are bred with external inputs, we all become monocultures. And here, in your cultures, you are doing an internal input from the grandmothers to the grandchildren, and therefore diversity can thrive. Therefore, the celebration of diversity can thrive. But let me just give you one typical farm of my region, where we grow the millets, Mandua jangora, a very unique bean called the gehet, and another indigenous soya, not the hybrid soya, but an indigenous soya called the bhat. The bhat gives us 2,130 milligrams on an acre of beta-carotene, which is the equivalent, which is what allows vitamin A, exactly what the pumpkin will give you. Now, when they get rid of the pumpkin from the cornfield, or they get rid of the bhat from the cornfield, you do increase corn, but you decrease nutrition. And we now calculate, and I would ask the children to join with their teachers, to start working with the fields of traditional agriculture, to calculate the nutrition and health per acre that traditional agriculture gives. Because what is measured is yield per acre. Yield measures a commodity, not food. It measures what leaves the land, not what sustains the people. Yield is a measure of an exploitative society. It works for the Cargills of the world. It works for the Monsantos of the world. What we need is health per acre and nutrition per acre. So the soil can be nourished, our animals can be nourished, the pollinators and soil organisms can be nourished, our children can be nourished. That is what we have to start looking at. I want to start concluding with a few ideas about the global seed freedom movement we are trying to build. And I know all of you are so important to it because, you know, so often when I come to this country and I'm at a university and I'll have these very well-meaning young students say, you know, but we don't have a history of agriculture. We're such a recent agricultural society. I say, that's your problem. That's where the problem begins. That you continue to forget the real history of agriculture of this land. The day you remember that there have been native people on this land for millennia, and that you have to learn from them, that day the problems of society and agriculture will be sorted out. And I think from here I would like to actually send a message both to the White House and to Monsanto, to everyone else working on food. Let the three sisters lead. Let the big brother, Monsanto, step aside. Instead of looking at all the available vitamin A we have in our foods, they want to genetically engineer rice with vitamin A. It's 7,000% less efficient than the alternatives in our biodiversity and our seeds. And when we say that this is not the solution to blindness, I'm accused of killing 2 million children, exactly 2 million. Now, vitamin A deficiency and death don't usually go together, but in any case, vitamin A deficiency is because you've destroyed the sources of vitamin A in our food. You've destroyed the sources of nutrition in our food because you've destroyed the traditional seed and you've destroyed the knowledge of our ancestors, which is the only kind of knowledge that will go into the future. So the seed freedom movement globally is based on 2 or 3 basic principles. First, the recognition of the gift of the seed from the earth and our ancestors. That we haven't received seed from Monsanto. We've received them from the earth and our grandmothers. The second, that seed is living and has a longing to be free, to grow in evolution. In evolution means as the climate changes, a free seed will evolve and adapt. Seed is not static. And the fact that it's not static and the fact that it evolves is there in the fact that out of one wild plant called teosinte, look at the diversity of corn that has been created. Look at the diversity of pumpkins that are right here in this hall. Another very important aspect is any law that comes in the way of the freedom of the seed and the freedom of our culture to continue to save seed, to continue to freely exchange seed, any law that comes in the way, we have a duty to not obey it. We have a duty. We have a duty to follow the law of the seed as given by the earth and creation and our cultures. And I think one of the very important works, so we've done a law of the seed as a scientific legal framework. It's available on the website of Navdanya, Navdanya. And I hope you will all frame your own laws according to your particular articulation of what the seed is. I know there's been a declaration of seed sovereignty, but I think we need to go deeper to articulate what seed means to us and what are the laws that it creates for our behavior. And therefore, what are the laws we will not obey, because those are not laws. Those are illegitimate, illegal, brutal dictatorships imposed on us, and we will not, as free people, obey them. You know, Monsanto's getting a bit desperate because its seeds aren't working. The BT seeds don't control pests. The Roundup Ready seeds don't control weeds. We have super pests, super weeds. Half of America's farmlands are overtaken by super weeds. They're now recommending the spraying of 2,4-D, an ingredient of Agent Orange that was sprayed on Vietnam. All of that is so unnecessary. But they've given themselves, just a few days ago, on World Food Day, they gave themselves a World Food Prize. They are on the board, they are on the sponsorship of the prize, and they gave a huge donation, and they thought giving themselves this prize would rescue their image. We, of course, started a big campaign to say they don't feed the world, they poison the world. If at all, they should be tried for ecocide and genocide, not be given a food prize. But we started something more. We said, let us honor the real food heroes in our communities and our cultures. Our grandmothers, our teachers, the farmers, those who cook, the wonderful, what do you call the corn? Cereal, I would call it, with orange and cinnamon that we just had this morning. Tole. Tole should be honored, and it should just be people. The corn is a real food hero. And all the products of corn are real food heroes. Because at least in our culture, corn, food is a person. Yeah. Anam Brahmam. I am the creator, says the food. Because it is creation embodied and creation replenishing itself. So let's start making these lists of real food heroes. We have created a website called seedfreedom.in. You should do this on your own schools, in your communities, but also post what you want to, because we really want to reply to this one big brother, to say there's such an abundant world of millions of species, such a creative world of millions of creative people, creative hands, creative minds, creative hearts. We will not be bullied by you anymore. We will create a world that is a livable world. And while listening this morning, I was just thinking, you know, given that Columbus created the blunder of naming everyone Indian, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a reunion of Indians in India. Every year, you know, we run an Earth University on our farm where we conserve seeds. We're harvesting 670 varieties of rice right now, and then we'll plant about 150 varieties of wheat with all the associate crops. And as part of this Earth University, we always offer a grandmother's university, and I hope some of the grandmothers from here will come. And we do a course every year on the A to Z of seed and soil and food. Because it's all been managed in fragmented ways. Just the soil, just the seed, just the compost, just the vermiculture, and food, of course, separately. It's all connected. The seed with the soil gives us the food. And if it's dead seed and dead soil, it'll give us dead food. If it's living seed and living soil, it'll give us living and nourishing food. We do this in September. And on 1st of October, 2nd October is Gandhi's birth anniversary. And around that time, we always celebrate the earth through a festival called Bhumi. Next year, we'll celebrate the gifts of food from the earth. And I hope some of you will be able to travel. I hope some of you will be able to join the celebration. I would love to continue to work with you on this and to keep alive this amazing celebration of our diversity, of our resilience and our resistance, and our absolutely insurmountable love for freedom and love for the future of our future generations. Thank you all for having me here.